G'day folks, welcome to part 3 of this playthrough of the Grand Campaign of 1914 Serbian Muss, Sterbien. We're commencing here in the third month of the campaign. We start in October and the story continues quite well for the Serbians. They're dominating in all over the place really. In the centre they're holding the ground quite well. It's very quiet throughout these initial turns in October. Nothing really happening in this area as both sides have improved their positions. And most of the action has been taking place up in the north, in that Serbian region. And we'll go over the details as we look closer at the situation here. So where those improved positions are, there is nothing happening. Both sides have dug in, and neither really has a numerical advantage to do anything in this area. All the action is taking place up in the north. We can see up in the far northern side of this image, the Serbian divisions are once again outflanking and outnumbering those isolated Austro-Hungarian defenders. They have forced some divisions across the Danau River. It makes it very difficult for them to come back over, and I'll show you what happens there in just a moment. Further south, pretty quiet. The Serbians just gradually, very slowly, pushing those Austro-Hungarians off that high ground in the north where the 15th Corps are. 16th Corps is very quiet. Now on game turn 20, up in the north, it's the same story. The Serbians pushing the Austrians across the Danau and driving the Austro-Hungarians west, retreating away from the area, whilst clearing them off the mountains in the south into the 15th Corps. Again, looking closer, you can see what's happening here. In this situation, the 9th Division of that Austro-Hungarian 5th Army has been driven across the Danau. It is very difficult for them to come back over. Once they are forced back across that river, they need to use those ferries further to the west, and they're running out of river crossings on the map. And now it's the 21st, I think, or the 29th in the firing line, that green unit in the centre, and they'll take a battering as well. Now way down the south here you can see the Serbians, what they're doing is gradually pushing the Austro-Hungarians off that high elevation and threatening that north-south road. They're taking roughly a hex every turn. It's very slow progress, but yeah, they're making their way through those positions. Now game turn 21 was quite a dramatic one in the south. In the north, everything's going as normal. It's stayed quiet in the centre. In the north, in that Serbian region, the Serbians are just plodding along, slowly pushing those demoralised Austrians away to the west. There are now two completely demoralised Austrian divisions up in this area. Both of them, I think, have temporarily been pushed back across the Danau. And if we zoom in, you can probably see those units way up in the north in detail, not doing too well. And so what the Serbians are doing here is sending their assets north to cover those ferry crossings to basically prevent the Austro-Hungarians from crossing back into this region. And it's the same strategy, just isolate and reduce the combat effectiveness level of those Austro-Hungarians. Now it's in the south where the big turning point was. You can see here this is a very different situation from last turn. The Serbians were just pushing off, or trying to push off that last Austro-Hungarian brigade off the high ground. It was a stalemate, there was no result, but I think both sides had a +2 to their combat effectiveness level check. Unfortunately, the Serbian Uzici, I think, formation perhaps rolled a 12. They were already reduced to a CEL level of 8. With a +2, this pushed them up to 6, which demoralised them, and because they were demoralised, they were forced to retreat. The Austrians then immediately drove along that mountain range and counterattacked in force, which then heavily damaged the other division, which was, I think, the Drina 1 division in that formation. So this is the two core Serbian divisions that had been operating. So one was a division, the Drina 1st is a division, the Uzici Brigade was the other one. And they'd been the main force in this northern area where the 15th Corps was. They'd both been demoralised. They both now have to retreat and try to recover. And it leaves the Serbians in a very weak position up here in the north. I mentioned earlier, the Austro-Hungarians have just pushed all their assets and brigades from the 16th Corps up to the 15th Corps in this area. They now have overwhelming numerical superiority, and they're driving hard along that that road to Zici in the east, where those Serbian supply units are. So a devastating blow to the Serbians, who were really quite on the cusp of pushing those Austro-Hungarians down into the valley and off the high ground, and just one bad morale check effectively, and they've had to retreat a long way. So the Austrian 15th Corps on game turn 22 are driving east along that road, and they're sending all these small brigades, and it's good timing because the divisions who were recovering behind the lines way out in the west have just about reached full recovery, and they're just about to head east as well. Again, it is the same story way up in the north. Not much to say really here. The Serbians again trying to pick off, isolate and smash those weak Austro-Hungarian defenders. You can see way up in the north, I think it's the 9th Division and the 29th Division of the Austro-Hungarian 5th Army are trying to pull back away from the lines. They are both demoralised and need to move 5 or more hexes away from the Serbians to begin their recovery. You'll see them gradually retreat back south across the Sava River over the coming turns. But most of the action here, the tension, is really down in the south here, where these Austro-Hungarian units are driving along that road. The biggest challenge they're facing here is supply. There's only that one road leading from that 15th Corps supply train. And again, as I've mentioned in the past, these units can only go one mountain hex off that road. Supply can go into that hex, but no further. And further north of that 15th Corps area, that valley, it is very difficult to get supply in there. You can see that extended supply area in the north, but it's hard to get supplies anywhere in this area, so they're really driving along that road. Now on turn 23, basically what the Serbians are doing is they're rushing any available assets south. You can see over in the east of that situation, the south there. I'll zoom in on this in just a moment. They've sent assets south, and their 2 divisions in the south are desperately trying to recover as fast as possible. They're 5 hexes from the enemy, so they can do that where they are there. And it's really left to one Serbian brigade and a lot of sort of scrambled together assets in this area to try to slow the Austro-Hungarians down. The Austro-Hungarians are making some weak attacks in the centre, which has eliminated another Serbian asset. Here you can see a sort of more detail. For the time being, the Austrians are holding this, I guess, the entry to this low ground quite well. You can see they've reduced some of those Austro-Hungarian units. That's not a problem at all for the Austro-Hungarians. They've had a few lucky die rolls in defence, the Serbians, so the Austrians haven't been able to have a huge breakthrough. The Serbians here are probably 1 or 2 hexes away from disaster. If the Austro-Hungarians had just captured those 2 hexes on the left there, it would have been a lot of trouble. Now up in the north again, here's the situation between the Sava and the Danube rivers. You can see all those small Serbian assets just blocking those ferries. The ferries are hard to see. They're little boats on the river, so if you look closely at the Danube, just below that K-Corps train, you can see a little boat in the river, and that's where they can cross. And that's basically what those smaller assets are moving to defend. It takes up a lot of those smaller units, but it basically isolates all those Austro-Hungarian units north of the Danube River, and it gives those larger formations the freedom to move out to the west. Now, game turn 24 was pretty quiet. You can see way up in the north here, the Austro-Hungarians have just pulled completely out of that Serbian region. So the Serbians have effectively captured this region of Serbia, of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, sorry. And they're about to see, if you just look up near the Sava River, they're about to shift their forces around down to the south, and there are a lot of demoralised and combat ineffective Austro-Hungarian forces out to the west. They're not going to pose a threat immediately. So what the Serbian plan here is to shift south to begin to outflank those Austro-Hungarian improved positions. You can see that line of trenches there running from the Drina down into the mountains. Well, those 2 large Serbian formations currently north of the Sava are going to cross over and see if they can threaten those Austro-Hungarian supply lines. You can see that 9th Corps train in the centre there. And down the south, again, Serbia's doing quite well to defend. The Austrians are just struggling to advance along that road. You can see they've started to move northeast of the Drina in this area, but this is where their supplies are really stretched to their limits. They need the 15th Corps to break through these roads, capture Uzice in the centre here. That is a critical crossroads. If the Serbians can hold that ground, the Austrians can go no further. That road from their 15th Corps supply train drives straight towards Uzice, and then it splits up in several directions, and this is what the Austro-Hungarians need to capture over the next few turns if they are to make any further progress in this region. All the while, the Serbians are recovering their effectiveness, so it's really a race for Uzice. The Serbians trying to recover and get back in there and defend the town. The Austro-Hungarians racing to capture it before those two large formations can get back into the fighting. Well, on turn 25, all the attention has shifted to this southern sector where the 15th Corps is driving on Uzice. Up in the north, things are very quiet. There is one Serbian division now guarding that western side of the Serbian sector. Their other divisions are very quickly, as fast as they can, rotating around to the south. Here's a focus on that northern sector, and it is just very quiet around here. There are no attacks. Out in the far west, there are 3 Austro-Hungarian formations recovering. There is one Serbian division just hanging around that area. They're going to be in trouble, I imagine, when those Austro-Hungarians recover and begin to push to the east again. But for the time being, the Serbians have more pressing concerns in the south, and they've been rotating all their available formations through to this southern area. You can see here how the Austro-Hungarians have just been slowly pushing to the east. They've gained those 2 hexes to the west of Uzice in the centre of the image here. And they are struggling, the Serbians now. They are trying to recover out in the east. They are rushing their assets and divisions to this area, but things aren't looking good. Okay, well, the following turn 26, the Austro-Hungarians didn't delay. They threw everything at Uzice and captured it quite quickly. The Serbians just weren't able to bring enough defenders to the area. They were left scrambling to get a few assets thrown into the town, and the Austro-Hungarians pretty quickly cast aside those far weaker units. Now, again, up in the north, things are very quiet. I mentioned last turn, you can see the Serbians rotating their divisions to the south. You can see just below that 3rd token on the right, that's one of those Serbian divisions that was up in the Sirmian area. They've just been rotating behind those Serbian lines and are rushing down to that southern sector. That's pretty much the only movement that took place in this whole area. Yeah, everything else is pretty quiet. Likewise with the Austro-Hungarians here, they're not doing much at all. They are rotating the part of that 13th Corps around to the south, and that was about it. But here is where the main activity was. The 15th Corps have captured Uzice. They are surrounding now those Serbians. So the Serbians are beginning to experience that feeling of being surrounded by the enemy. It's a reversal of what was happening up in the north. And having captured Uzice, they now have freedom to send their supply train into this area and to use that north-south road to help support the 13th Corps further to the north. This frees up their movement, gives them a lot more options, and places a lot of pressure on the Serbians in this area. You can see they're withdrawn from that 16th Corps area in the south. They've just had to rush to the north to Uzice, else they'll be cut off. On game turn 27, you can see the effect of this. So the Austro-Hungarians now, with more freedom of supply, are beginning to shift to the north. They're moving up into that 13th Corps area, to the southern end of that Serbian 3rd Corps region, moving along those mountain roads, and they will be able to draw supply from that 13th Corps train in the south, whilst attacking across the mountain ranges. The 13th Corps in the north also launched some attack on that Loznica brigade and were successful, so they are also starting to join in this offensive action in this central area. The Loznica brigade didn't suffer too much of a reduction in their CEL, they were just forced to retreat, so they've pulled back. And behind the lines there are some other Serbians trying to recover their combat effectiveness levels. And here's just a close-up on that situation in the south. The Austro-Hungarians, you can see the Montenegrins now joining the line. They are now within supply range of their supply points in the south and fighting alongside the Serbians to try and form a line. But you can see north of those 3 Serbian and Montenegrin units there is a big gap. And it is right at the top of that gap where that road leads to connect to the 13th Corps, and I think that's where the Serbians are going to be in trouble next. It's only really the Loznica brigade, a Serbian division behind the lines, and a couple of assets in this area. Alright, so that brings us to the end of the turn, and it's the end of the month as well. There are only a couple of turns left. There's about 10-12 turns left, but this is where the Austrian-Hungarians now have all their reinforcements on the board. They are numerically superior in many areas, and once those units recover up in the top northwest near Serbien, they are really going to threaten the Serbian positions.